Welcome to the Pharos Fit podcast, where we help you to explore your capacity to move better, push further, and achieve your limitless potential through fitness, nutrition, recovery, and lifestyle. Hey guys, welcome back to the Pharos Fit podcast. I am here today with Emylee Covell.
Hello.
My mountain wife.
As opposed to...
my city wife, I guess.
But today I'm wearing it real hard.
I don't have one city wife and one mountain wife. They're the same.
Yeah,
person.
I get the joke, but you should definitely make it clear to everyone else.
Right. And Brandon, my producer. Hey, Brandon.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good. Today, guys, we want to talk about pregnancy and postpartum. We have covered this topic before, but we are a family-based gym. We have a lot of families at the gym. We have a lot of mothers at the gym. And we deal with a lot of pregnancies at the gym. It seems more and more. And Emylee especially gets a lot of people coming up to her and asking her advice about pregnancy and postpartum. You know, people obviously have a lot of concerns. They want to stay active, they want to stay fit, but they're not sure how to go about it. And there are obviously certain issues involved with pregnancy and postpartum that come up. So today we want to kind of deep dive into the topics of pregnancy and postpartum. Emylee is somewhat of a guru on the subject, having obviously both been pregnant and studied pregnancy and postpartum and obviously certified in it. So, Emylee, hello, first of all.
Hi.
I wanted to start with kind of a general overview of pregnancy and postpartum. When you approach the subject, what do you think would be like the overriding theme of how to deal, how to coach an athlete who is either pregnant or is postpartum?
Okay, so there's kind of two questions wrapped into that, because there is the approach from both the athlete themselves and then the approach from the fitness professional or like the coach, right?
Sure.
And that is such an important thing to both differentiate but also talk about, because as a coach, I've been coaching for, over 10 years now. And I've worked with pregnant and postpartum athletes before. I did not get properly certified, and I did not get any education or, have any curiosity about the education until I myself was pregnant. And then I did the pregnancy and postpartum athleticism certification and kind of deep dive into how should I be approaching this, because I know my body's changing and all of a sudden now I feel like I know nothing. So I feel like the first part is telling fitness professionals, you will deal with this. They're 51% of the population, and some will and some will not, and some fathers will have have wives and partners that they are dealing with. So at any time, you will deal with this. So it's nice to have some education around it. And just like most fitness approaches, that the cookie cutter approach will not work. The quick fix marketed approaches will not work. And, it's really important to kind of come up with some form of a formula that helps you individualize each person's approach.
Well, and also the stakes are higher, right? You're now responsible for essentially two people in front of you. So it's not like the worst thing that can happen is you don't get the fat loss results that you wanted. That's why you come to the gym. Now it's like, as a fitness professional, you are responsible for the well-being of the two people who are now in front of you.
Totally. And I mean, hopefully coaches wear that weight with the one person in front of them. And the responsibility and, the opportunity and responsibility of having that person trust you and listen to you and be guided by you. But then it's also, like I said, the responsibility of the athlete. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but the athlete brain and what you think you can do and what you can do and what you maybe should do, and the more mental sides of being pregnant and wanting to push yourselves and still having this idea of having your body and wanting to live in it and control it to some extent while it's totally taking control of you. And so there's so many things at play when it comes to pregnancy and postpartum, both for the coach and for the athlete, that I kind of wanted to just sit down and be like, all right, what's the formula? How do we approach it? Because there's also a lot of bad advice and a lot of misinformation. And most of it is wrapped around really great marketing, so like fear tactics or like banking off of people's insecurities of like how quickly can you lose the baby belly and the fears of diastasis and, your abdominal wall being ripped apart and like all of that like fear tactics around it, that I think it's important to kind of peel down all of the layers and just kind of come back to like the training basics of it,
Well, and also I feel like there's two extremes. There's the extreme of like, well, exercise is bad for you. I'm not going to do anything during my pregnancy because I don't want to hurt my baby. And then there's, I'm going to keep doing everything I was doing before because it's not going to slow me down because I'm, strong woman, hear me roar type thing.
The pendulum swings in both ways and they both feed one another because, one side will see the other side being like, oh, I'm not going to lift more than 10 pounds and be like, yeah, that's not for me. I'm going to go the crazy route,
So often, and as with all things, the answer is neither on the left nor on the right, but somewhere in the middle.
But somewhere swinging across in the middle and hopefully swinging in the direction of like your alignment is not necessarily at the center of that pendulum, you know? So figuring out what that is for you. So I've thought about this a lot because I have over the past, year, as it turned out, and not by chance, not by reaching out. It's just so many people in our community. I've worked with a woman with IVF all throughout the process, and now she's about to give birth, within days of right now, and she's going in for her scheduled C-section. I'm working with a postpartum woman who I've been with for a really long time, and went pregnant and had emergency C-section, and working with that recovery. I have a woman who had natural birth, but now a since diastasis. And so it's like everyone's in this kind of different training cycle. I wanted to sit down and be like, okay, how should we be approaching all of this? So I came prepared, Peter.
Good.
Because you asked the question, how should we approach? I'm like, wow, that's such a big question, Yeah. So I wanted to kind of boil it down. Here is how I kind of approach and how I approached my own pregnancy and postpartum journey, and how I like to try to share others, both professionals and athletes, to think about theirs. So step number one is establishing what your training cycle is. So we talk about cycles all the time. We are big into programming with purpose, right? So there are, little mini cycles and mesocycles and macro cycles. Am I missing anything, Peter? Is my education very good? So when we think about, pregnancy, that's going to be a 9-month cycle. And it probably will be more like 3-month cycles within that 9-month cycle, right? First, second, third trimester. And so instead of thinking, oh, what am I going to do through pregnancy? It's nice to just overall approach it as like, this is a different cycle. This is not a bulking. Well, I guess it is a bulking phase, right? But, I'm not in a leaning phase. I'm not in a performance. I'm not in a sport specific. I'm not, you're also there. You're not training for being as lean as possible postpartum. Like, just focus on this cycle right now instead of stressing yourself out about what you can do now to, set yourself up for either a good birth or a good postpartum, because there's honestly no such thing. Like, I'm going to really set myself up for a solid birth. Sometimes that works out great. Sometimes things happen that are beyond our control, and, things happen that you don't even know.
So if we were to look at the pregnancy as a whole, so we have the 9, it's not 9 months, by the way, it's 10 months.
It says such a lie. The lie starts with that.
So 10 months is the mesocycle.
Yes.
And then you could kind of maybe argue that each trimester is the macrocycle. And then you've got the microcycle as how you feel on a weekly basis.
Totally.
Kind of
especially as your body is changing. Obviously, we know that pregnancy is broken down into weeks. How many weeks pregnant are you, right? Because every week it seems like something new is happening. So yes, you can absolutely think of that. And then there's this big thing in the pregnancy and postpartum athleticism community that's like, pregnancy is temporary, but postpartum is forever.
Right.
So then it turns into the cycle, the training cycles for postpartum, and overarchingly, the rest of my life / breaking that down into now the training cycles that we're used to in training. So I think number one is thinking of your training cycle. And it's like, what do you want to train for? You want to train for mobility. I want to train to be able to get on and off the toilet all throughout the 9 months of pregnant. I want to be able to feel good, find energy in the morning. I want to, some of it is that control of like, I want to be able to do something for me and for myself, as my body is changing. It could be, I want to witness this incredible and weird transformation that's happening over the course of these weeks to see how my body is changing. I always talk about like, if you're an athlete and you're afraid of being pregnant because it's like, oh, what's it going to do to my body? And I'm so used to like training so hard and being like that. I'm like, well, then literally nothing is better than pregnancy and postpartum, because it's the opportunity to like see what your body is really capable of in the most evolutionary, like fundamental way. And then to approach that from like, okay, I strip back down. I know I build myself back up from the basics and then beyond, So knowing your training cycle and what you are training for, and hopefully working with your coach then to come up with things that aren't aesthetic based, that aren't, that how can you find challenge and enjoyment through training that isn't just pushing yourself to the limits to, or to the sexy PRs of lifting heavy and stuff like that,
And also, isn't it the argument that you will have a more, or statistically, you will have a more an easier birth if you have a strong core on your, if you've trained yourself to, stay strong in the areas that you're meant to stay strong and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And also, and this isn't to, this isn't to shame anybody that puts on a lot of weight during pregnancy, but is there an argument for like staying healthy through pregnancy by not letting yourself get too heavy?
Yeah, so I'll approach those first from the misconceptions and then from the agreement, right? So the misconception around a strong core, the answer is yes. If you are active and moving, just like in everyday life, you are less susceptible to enduring illness and enduring issues. The more mobile you are, the more strategies you have in place, mostly around breath, if you're planning on having, what they consider a quote unquote natural birth. There are many. There's a lot of training that you can do to set yourself up. Yes. Sometimes now you could have what's called a hypertonic pelvic floor, which means you are too strong, too wound up. You can't relax into it. And so that constriction, totally. So the constriction and contraction of your core and pelvic floor, and then compounding that with the natural stretchiness of your ligaments and tendons and fascial wall, sometimes can cause problems postpartum. It can cause, there's an argument that more tearing during childbirth happens because of tightness through the pelvic floor and the inability to relax. So I think, yes, there's an argument for being strong and, both aerobically strong and having good breathing strategies and movement strategies to work with how your body is adapting. That absolutely sets you up for a better pregnancy, birth and postpartum journey. But I do think that pendulum swings all the way over, because then it turns into, people may be doing some unnecessary core work thinking that they need to be, training for birth, and that I need to be strong for birth, and that strength comes from contraction, where really the strength comes from relaxing. The strength comes from, right? It's like, it's easy. It's easy to get a massage and to tense up through the whole thing and be like, God, this sucks. But it's really difficult to relax into it so the work can actually be done. And it's
interesting because when you think about it, from an evolutionary standpoint and historically, obviously in decades and centuries past, we didn't have access to gyms and so forth. But generally speaking, people were just moving a lot more. People were moving around a lot more, walking a lot more, just in general staying more mobile than we do with our sedentary lives and our transport and all that kind of stuff. So, it could be argued, well, we didn't do all this exercise 100 years ago. Why would I need to go to the gym now? It's like, well, 100 years ago we were, moving around a hell of a lot more and not so sedentary. So you can see how the argument could be.
Right, which is an argument for gyms in general, right? Where it's like, oh, well, we didn't need a gym.
Right.
It's like, well, yeah, but you were also like rummaging through forests and trying to find things to eat and climbing trees and going through things and trying to you were moving and active. So that are, for life, for pregnancy,
for everything.
Be active. Yeah. So, training cycle. And then the next thing really to manage is mindset. And we call that the athlete brain, the can I versus should I. And that's a hard thing. It's like some days you'll feel really great. Some days you won't feel great. Some days, the ego speaks to you of like, why I've been doing toes to bar and I can continue to do toes to bar. Or I did toes to bar during first trimester and I'm going to try to push to see how long I can do them until I can't anymore, or things like that. And I think it's both important for the athlete to kind of scale back to be like, all right, can I versus should I?
Right.
Can I do it? Yeah, totally. I've done it before. I've been super proud of myself for doing it. My body is incredible. But in this training phase, do I need to? Should I do it?
Do you have when you think about trimesters, do you have blanket cutoffs that's like, you should not do this in the third trimester, you should not do this in the second trimester? Or is it more depending on the person?
Yeah, there are definitely some Pinterest, really good memes, really good graphics that get reposted about, stop doing this first, stop doing this second, stop doing this third. It definitely is more of a blending lines of, in theory, if you have good strategies in place, if your breathing is good, if your mobility is good, you can probably last a lot longer than maybe others. Again, the can I versus should I comes into play. But there are some blanket things I can say. In theory, you would take out highly explosive things.
Right.
In the second trimester. Maybe you're continuing some running and some light jumping and things like that, in the first. And then as you transition, you kind of lessen the amount of exploding type stuff. I remember a time when I was late in the second trimester and we went for a mile run and I was like, I feel pretty good. I think I'll just try to see how it goes. And then as I was coming back, I was like, yep, that's the last time I'm running, And so there you kind of learn as you go. I remember box jumping for a really long time because I felt like I had such a great breathing strategy of how I jumped off the box or jumped off the floor and landed onto the box. And it gave me such joy and thrill to continue to do it. Right. But I stopped doing single leg step ups in second trimester because I had a weird SI, sciatic pulling going on. So I actually stopped doing more stability, slow exercises, but still had the power for some explosive work. I know a woman who did handstands in the third trimester. I was going to ask you about handstands. Yeah, so that in theory you would stop doing core work. There's really no need to do core work as we understand it, right? Crunches, sit-ups, toes to bar, hanging leg raises, anything that you would classically, even planks. You might do dead bug type things maybe, but maybe not. In theory, there's really no need to do that kind of core work. I like to switch core work into breath, pelvic floor awareness, connection, and breath work. Right. It's the understanding of the entire spectrum of your pelvic floor and creating intra-abdominal pressure so you can then do other movements. So your core work comes into play no matter whether you're squatting, whether you're hinging. When you're pregnant and you're being stretched out and a baby's growing inside you, everything is core work, So what about, you, in theory, should be able to stop doing all core work and focus and kind of switch that strategy to more breathing and awareness and connection, really, of connection to breath, pelvic floor, and then the global movement pattern.
What about stuff like snatches? Because from the outside, you look at it, and it's like, oh my god, they're driving that barbell into the hips. Is there a danger there, or is that danger a myth? Or because I see pregnant women snatching, so I'm just So you definitely can. I modified.
I modified all of my snatch work to dumbbells. And the reason I did that was I heard this coach, and it spoke directly to me. Brianna Battles had someone on speaking about, Olympic lifting, you can train 10 years to fine tune your bar path, right? Like that bar path is supposed to be straight up and down. And as soon as you make contact at that, position 1 and pop straight up, it should go straight up. And as an athlete, pre-pregnancy, you work really hard to establish that skill. And then you'll allow yourself the compensation during pregnancy to let the bar path travel in a different way so you can continue to snatch, which is fine. You can, and people can do it all the way throughout, especially if they are strong, especially if they are practiced, if they've been doing it before. Like there are many, when you see it and it looks effortless and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how they do that. Like they're clearly the can I versus should I, because can you? Yeah, totally. And it looks great. Brava. Good for you. And the should I is, but man, did I really want to ruin 10 years of practicing my bar path for me to just lose it in 3 months of wanting to snatch, having to move around my belly. And so that was like a fun thing to be like, oh, I could, but I don't need to. And if I can modify it so that way when I come back postpartum to that bar, I still know what a straight bar path feels like, but in your handstanding 9 months pregnant, and they want you to stop doing handstands like second trimester, and like a lot of coning can happen. The diastasis can show while being pregnant when you're doing that kind of upside down stuff, and like the extension of the rib cage can cause a lot more of that. So, handstands usually a no. They made me feel like I was just going to die. Like all the blood was rushing to my head. Even down dogs, I eventually stopped doing. But I had a friend that did handstands like 9 months pregnant because it took pressure off of her pelvic floor, and it was so nice to flip herself upside down and like feel good, And it just like, it puts everything into perspective. It really makes you laugh at everything that's like, don't do this. Yes, do this. Don't do this. Or this is the timeline of 1, 2, and 3. It's like if you have connection and honest connection, not just like, oh, my ego is strong and I can do anything, but an actual honest assessment and connection with yourself, you can kind of morph it to your own.
And I also think, because so many of these rules and so many of these medical rules were written by men historically who have no real experience, awareness. They don't know how it feels. Oh yeah. They don't know the sensations.
But they certainly would like to make shoulds for other people.
Exactly. So they don't know what it's like to be in that situation, but they think they can, they think they know.
Yeah. So I don't think that there's anything no such thing as like a safe or unsafe exercise. I think that there are safe and unsafe strategies. I think there are safe and unsafe mindsets. Yeah. I think there, are safe and unsafe behaviors and and coaching relationships. Like we can perpetuate people's crazy a lot of times, like coaches can kind of feed into that. Well, okay, I know you want to say, you want to gain as little body fat as possible during pregnancy. Like I've heard people say that, like I want to get, that was my other misconception. I had to bring it back. Sorry, because I have had people who have gained 40 pounds and had a horrible time and had, and like had a ton of diastasis and a ton of pooching and a ton of like insecurities, and that their body wasn't back and all of that, and that they weren't ready. And I have had, my sister's a great example of someone who lost 80 pounds or who gained 80 pounds and then got married postpartum and had like a reason to lose it all, and trained really hard and got it all back. And it was no indication for her, like her gaining 80 pounds during pregnancy was no indication for how she was going to lose it postpartum. She did it. She was back to being healthy. Is there any
correlation between extreme kind of like weight gain during pregnancy and then depression post pregnancy, or is there no correlation?
Well, I don't know. I can't speak to. I wouldn't be able to speak to the masses on that, because like I said, it's like it's all up in the mindset, because I know just as many people who were twig thin, who thought that they weren't going to gain very much, who, their genetics taught them that they were going to bounce right back postpartum, and they had so many more postpartum depression that it didn't go the way that they planned or the way their genetics mapped out, or that somehow it was a reflection, like a shame and reflection on them, as opposed to just early in the journey, and everyone's on their own journey, and it should not be a race to quote unquote bounce back. And there are no while Instagram and people definitely feed into like, wow, you look amazing, you don't look like you had a baby at all, it's like that the well-meaning but like soul-crushing compliments that are that just like the change needs to happen there when it comes to the postpartum depression, because like making women feel bad for doing the most incredible thing to like bring new life into this world, and then put them on a clock to see how fast they can lose it, and then or praising women who seem to have lost it fast. Like, I'm a very good example of this. I did not lose my quote unquote baby weight fast, but we then went into COVID, and a COVID depression hit that got me very lean. And then I started getting a ton of compliments of like, wow, you got a baby that's a year old, blah, 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 you look amazing, and like all of that. And I was just sitting there in my head thinking like, God, this is exactly why we have issues, because like you were complimenting something that was a disorder for me.
By anxiety.
Yeah. And and so like I think talking about that more will help the overall conversation around that. And it's also important to note just very quickly that like postpartum depression is also very much chemical. Like it's not just I feel bad about myself and how I look. Like there are literal chemical imbalances that are happening, and it's easy to feel like it is in your control / also your fault. It's like this is happening to you, just like how pregnancy and all the weird changes happen to you, so yeah, it's like that's why they call it fourth trimester, because it's like there's still so much of your baby and pregnancy and the processes of pregnancy that are like flushing through your body, breastfeeding, all of that, the attachments, it's a whole shebang. Yeah. Man, you talk about postpartum depression. That's a whole separate thing. I was like, wait a second. Yeah.
For sure.
What was that combing thing you were talking about earlier?
Coning. That was actually that was what my number 4 is. So thanks for bringing it on back.
As someone who has never gone through this stuff,
So diastasis. Diastasis is unavoidable. This is what my point is. How should fitness professionals approach?
What is it? Because a lot of people don't. Well,
okay. So diastasis is the basically the separation of the connective tissue, so the fascial abdominal wall. It's the separation of that in order to allow room for your baby to grow out, right? So that is just like diastasis is the process by which that happens. And now it's become marketed into this diagnosis that you have and that you're trying to avoid, or there's so many like marketing things about like pregnancy programs to avoid diastasis. It's like, what are you talking about? Diastasis is literally what's happening in your body as you are it's unavoidable. So I think that there is this but to answer your question, that separation then causes coning of the abdominal wall. So let's imagine that you're gonna come up and do a crunch sit-up, and usually your skin / flab and fat and all of that and muscle will kind of contract down and together. So you can you can all imagine, all right, I crunch up and all my little rolls and skin kind of push down. In diastasis or in coning, I might come up and then imagine that there's a cone in the middle of my stomach, from my sternum, from the bottom of my rib cage, down to my belly button. And that could be a very, very tiny cone. Like I was talking to you earlier about seeing our nephew, our 5-year-old nephew hanging from a bar and then bringing his knees up. And I saw his little baby coning and I was like, oh, it happens in like developing, kids too. Or it could be massive. Like I said, I'm working with a postpartum woman who is about 6 inches on a bad day, 4 inches under control of that separation. So that's kind of what that means.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there's the fear tactics around diastasis are very strong. I feel like it went from the speaking of the pendulum
It's a big
swings,
stigma, isn't it?
Yeah. The first side of the pendulum swing is like, what? Like, I don't know what that, to like not knowing what it is or anything about it. And then the pendulum swinging over to what can I do to stop it? Or what can I do to recover from it postpartum? And then, of course, marketing around all of that. So I just wanted to be clear to fitness professionals that it is not something to be afraid of. It will happen. It's unavoidable. It happens in 99 / can I feel good? Knock on some, science wood. 100% of the time, diastasis. Yeah, my coaster. 100% of the time, diastasis is occurring. So
it just reveals itself more in some women than others.
Yes, and that could be because of a million reasons. Like I imagine a rubber band that you stretch out like a little bit too many times. And so it's, it kind of loses its elasticity. So that elasticity then has a hard time contracting, right? It's not a muscle. It's connective tissue. It's fascia. It means that it gets a lot less blood flow than muscles and it doesn't contract in the same way. And that it takes a lot more time. Like imagine a ankle sprain takes forever to heal as opposed to even a clean break fracture of something because the tendons and ligaments just don't get as much blood flow and don't have as much. So then that presents itself as like softness and laxity, and then like pooch, or like then it looks like quote unquote fat, right? It looks like belly fat, but really it's just like softness of the belly. It's not even fat. And sometimes it, like if it's a light diastasis, it can go away with a great breathing strategy. So, I take an inhale, and on my exhale, I think about my, not just like pushing out, but that my ribs pull into my belly button and that my pelvic floor pulls in and up into my belly button, right? So I have a canister pushing down, I have a canister pulling up, and that creates kind of the pressure around as opposed to, or and then holding your breath or that type of thing. So a lot of times diastasis can be resolved in the moment with really good breathing strategies. And like anything done repetitiously and patterned appropriately over time and then loaded, it can then become less and less and less. I keep tripping over my words because it's not even like it cures. Like I'm 2 years postpartum and almost 2 years to the day.
Crazy, huh?
I know.
Yeah, happy birthday
to my buddy. But all like I can I can say I'm like back, but I can be doing like toes to bar and filming myself, and if I'm just like going and flailing and huffing and puffing, I'll see a little bit of coning on my own stomach. Or if I'm doing like ab rollouts, that's a good example where I'm like going and I'll look down and be like, whoa, I need to change my strategy because I am coning all over the place, and then I can get a better strategy of breathing, of support, of like positioning through my body, and then it goes away. So, don't be afraid of it. Know about it. Know that strategies help keep it at bay, and that, the more feedback that you have, the more, you can adapt.
Can we touch briefly on nutrition? Is there anything else you want to say about this topic before I move on to...
No, please.
Because I remember during your pregnancy, you really didn't feel like eating much protein. You kind of craved just simple carbs more. Why is that? And how did your nutritional journey evolve from the start of the pregnancy to the end?
That's a good question. So at the beginning, I really just wanted to eat carbs. And not even fat, really just carbs.
I remember it was just Just carbs. Yeah.
And protein. So the things that I pretty much had a hard time with throughout all of pregnancy was protein and raw vegetables. So like salads. I think I ate one salad throughout all of pregnancy. So yeah, 10 months, one salad.
Do you think it's because, obviously it's harder to digest protein. It's harder to digest raw vegetables. Do you think that's part of it?
Yeah, I also think that probably at the beginning, like then I had like really bad nausea and all of that, and like you just want simple carbs.
Yeah.
Like you want,
stuff your body can easily
you want
process
applesauce, saltines, crackers. You want little, simple toast.
Yeah.
With some butter on it, maybe, but maybe
Yeah.
not. Maybe just the simple toast.
Right.
Yeah.
Just with some jam.
Yeah, with some jam. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Good preserve, yeah.
Yeah.
I found that I learned so much about how, like, I remember having a pregnant athlete and then talking about nutrition and having opinions. And then like being pregnant and laughing at myself.
Yeah,
and like
'cause
even
it's so
like
different, yeah.
men that prescribe women eating like meal plans during pregnancy, I think is just one of the weirdest things that is in this universe.
I know RP do a pregnancy plan.
Yeah, and I hope that the people that work on it are women
Who have been
who have or someone who has been pregnant postpartum or who have dealt a lot with them. Because
that's the worry. It's like, well, this is what you should be eating. It's like, it's fine to say that, but unless you've been in that situation, unless you know how it feels,
right.
Like there's some things you're just not going to feel like eating.
Yeah, and sometimes they blame the kid. Like they'll be like, "Oh, I bet he's gonna hate." Like they were like, "Oh, I bet he's gonna hate protein or salads." And like now, Wyatt's like third word was meat.
Protein,
yeah. He says protein shake now, and it's so cute. But yeah, so I don't know. I am definitely not an expert on pregnancy and postpartum nutrition. But I did become more like forgiving and understanding and compassionate about how difficult it is to find that. In theory, the more balanced you eat, like they say that can limit the effects of nausea, and you should try to do, like eat something right in the morning and try to eat more balanced and try to eat more often throughout the day and stuff. But I feel like that's all just, throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing what sticks. So you just gotta figure out what works for you and not worry too much. Nutrient density is still a thing, right? Like you want to give your baby the right stuff.
Needs,
So, but I think you tap into that maternal instincts and it all,
I imagine it must be a hard line to draw between, oh, my baby's hungry, I need to eat, and not just like constantly just overeating because you think your baby needs to eat.
Yeah, I think they said something that like you're not really eating for two, that you end up averaging an extra like 450 calories. Like it ends up being like, an extra snack here and there.
Right.
And I think there were definitely times that times of the trimesters that I didn't want to eat and then force myself to eat because I had to. And then there were times that I was just like ravenous and, let that happen. Tried not to take, like I know what balanced eating looks like, but I knew what was happening to me. And it's a hard thing to know. Like, am I leaning into this? Should I just let myself eat all these Oreo cookies and all this ice cream because like I'm pregnant? And like, sure, you got a lifetime of dealing with other people. Like, you got a lifetime of parenting. And if you want to gorge on a, pint of ice cream right now,
here.
queen, whatever you got to do, but like, hopefully and usually you want to approach it with a balanced idea of like, okay, I want to get some carbs, proteins, and fats in me. I want to try to balance them out. I want to definitely consume more. You don't want to be an intermittent faster pregnant woman. You don't want to wait until noon. A lot of times,
terrible.
But a lot of times morning. Well, it's hard because you feel nauseous maybe all throughout the day. It's not just the morning, but you feel nauseous, so then you don't eat. But the answer really is to eat and to kind of stabilize your blood sugar levels a little bit and kind of like helps that out. But it's that kind of double-edged sword or self-fulfilling whatever of like, I don't want to eat, and then I wait until noon, then I feel even worse, and then I haven't eaten all day, so I'm going to gorge and eat myself silly before I go to bed. And so, trying to just like meet yourself where you are and approach it with balance, but know that, again, this is but a phase of your life. This is not the end all be all. You know, consuming that pint of ice cream does not set you up for, you know, your kid to have diabetes. Like, you can also go down that rabbit hole of like every single thing you put in your body is like, you know, a make or break it. It's not your, you know.
I mean, I think with pregnancy and postpartum, you know, like a lot of things in fitness, we need to attach less guilt. We need to attach less, you should be doing this, you should feel like that, and just understand that everybody's journey is going to be a little bit different. We can't look at someone, you know, as in the gym, someone who's doing the same workout as us getting different results. We can't be upset by that because everybody is different, and pregnancy is just the same. Like, you're going to feel differently to the next person. You're going to have a different appetite. You're going to have different cravings. You're going to be in different phases at different times.
Totally. And so some days you may feel like you're totally crushing it. And then on others, you're like, what's wrong with me? And you just got to take it day by day.
And talk, right? And talk to people, and not walk around keeping everything in and feeling like, you know, you're doing something wrong, or feeling like you're eating something wrong. You know, just be as
find
open
that
and
community.
Yeah. Can we talk a bit about breath? We kind of touched on it a little bit, but
yes. So I'm a breathing maniac. People make fun of me because I'll be in a workout and I have my style. And I pretty much sync up a breathing strategy to every single movement I do. So, and it's like a fun thing for me. If I'm doing box jumps, how am I breathing? Am I exhaling? Am I exhaling after my feet hit the box, or am I exhaling once my feet are off the floor and then hitting the box? Am I exhaling at the bottom of the rep, at the top of the rep, or throughout the entire range of motion, right? Like, so you're going there. So the main thing is that the breath is basically the fuel that provides connection for your muscles to move. Like, it really is like just the thing that like kind of circuit wires them together. So breath provides the connection that you need, and your breath really connects your pelvic floor. So like, you know, you got your hips and all the muscles on the inside of your hips that are keeping them all there. And then you got the transverse abdominis, so the human floaty device that wraps all the way around you, and from front back, from sternum down to hips, and then of course your rectus abdominis, like you know. So I'll start this off by speaking to the like power lifters or the CrossFitters or the like those kinds of athletes. The most popular breathing strategy that we use is called Valsalva. And that's basically taking an inhale, and let's imagine that you're wearing a weight belt, and the goal is to kind of push pressure against the weight belt, right, all the way around you. And that's supposed to like trick your body into turning on your TVA, or like, you know, and to support you all the way around. So you find that breathing strategy like this, right? So I go inhale, and I hold that breath and I push out. I'm pushing everything out. You can see it because it's also going to push it out of my brain. Yeah? Relax. We always joke. We talk about how that creates tension in your body, and that tension gives you the power that you need to move, right? We talk about that. You know, you're setting up for your back squat and you go, and then you go, right? Mm-hmm. And you do that. So now that is but one strategy to create intra-abdominal pressure. And that intra-abdominal pressure is pushing out and likely down. And let's say if you have a weak pelvic floor or you're pregnant, if you're pushing out, you're stretching against the linea alba and the fascia. And if you're pushing down, you're pressing against the like pelvic floor and putting more pressure on all of that, right? So, but it works because we can lift 1 rep max, right? It's really, right. It allows you to like keep everything tight. And then usually you exhale, like if we're going to use the back squat as an example, I'm going to exhale once I switch direction. So I go down, I hold it, I'm at the bottom, I exhale out of the bottom, right? That's like the standard way of breathing. The first kind of approach or strategy that I get athletes to think about, whether they're pregnant, postpartum, or not, because breathing strategies should change. You shouldn't use the same strategy that you use for an 80% or a 1 rep max lift as you do for cycling through, your row for all of that. So finding different strategies. So I like to take the back squat and say, okay, let's change instead to exhale through the entire range of motion. And when you exhale, I want you to imagine that like a cylinder, like a canister, or if you want to think about it like Star Wars and like the, like the walls that are coming in like this.
Yeah.
Yes, very good. Yes. Yeah, very, very good. So if you want to think about it like that, as you exhale, my ribs are pulling down into my belly button and my pelvic floor is pulling in and up. So I'm being met in the middle. Right? So I'm creating the pressure from the top to the bottom and meeting myself in the middle, as opposed to pushing out and down or holding my breath, right? So that might be a good example that someone who's pregnant or postpartum or experiencing, like, let's say that you, like a good example is when you pee during double unders. And now I will pause, disclaimer, go see a pelvic floor physical therapist, go chat with someone. But like the one good strategy that you could try to fix is changing your breathing strategy through double unders. So breathing strategies usually look like this. Right? It's high up into the chest. I'm holding my core tight and I'm controlling the breath through my upper cavity, as opposed to thinking that I'm going to I've done 3 double unders at that point.
Right.
Right? So I am using the cylindrical canister of my trunk to create the intra-abdominal pressure and core support that I need to keep my pelvic floor in tight. Yeah. So I'm not just tightening it, which then if it's weak or if it's like overly tight but loose, you'll still have laxity and then you might still pee yourself or like feel like you're empty or something's falling out of you, and you also get better at double unders. So you don't even need that advice for while you're pregnancy or postpartum, because usually when you're huffing and puffing, you're not going to hold on for the 100, 200, 300 that you're doing in the volume of a workout.
It reminds me of the ice baths. So the temptation when you get in the ice bath is big.
Yes.
And really you're just trying.
Yes. And that's a great example. When you're exhaling in the ice bath, you are thinking about the same thing because you want to generate internal heat in your body to keep you warm, right? So as you exhale, you're thinking of that same thing of like using your exhale to create fire and fuel that then pushes the rib cage down, pulls the pelvic floor in and up. While you're in the ice bath, you're like really calm, relaxed there. Yeah. Totally the same thing. So breathing strategies, you need them while you're pregnant for show, but you can take advantage of them regardless.
The message is universal.
Yeah.
So when we have a new athlete that comes to the gym, we often do like a screening, like a movement screening, how well they move and all that kind of stuff. How do you approach screening for someone that is both pregnant or postpartum? How do you go about that?
Yeah, some of it's the same, like movement screening through the global movement pattern, seeing how the athlete hinges and squats and pushes and pulls and, transfers, limb transfers from one side to the other, like a lunge or something. We still do all of that. I kind of break down screening for pregnant and postpartum athletes of you screen their movement, you screen their breath, and then screening their mindset should be a part of it too, right? Because you can tell a lot about an athlete if they're coming in pregnant and they're like, but I don't want to change anything. I want to keep doing exactly what I've been doing and I want to stay as fit as I possibly can. Like you can tell a lot about where that person is and what kind of coaching they might need, and ways in which that you might help them figure out the can versus should, but how to still find the excitement and the fervor and like the love of the sport to keep them excited for this 9-month training cycle 10-month training cycle.
Right, because motivation is still a big part of it, right? Just to keep someone motivated, they have to be enjoying themselves. They have to find a way have fun.
And if you're waking up nauseous or in pain, or you got, SI issues, or you got some laxity in your hip joints, or you got any type of thing, any things at all. I had cholestasis at the end. My whole body was itching. Last thing I wanted to do was squat, So yeah, you got to know that where you are mentally plays such a huge role, and keeping the light of why, keeping the love of movement and I like to approach it from like that thing I did for myself, to check in on myself, to have time with myself, to have opportunities to find better strategies, like trying to come up with helping the athlete come to that conclusion instead of trying to train for something or still do everything that they used to do, or the opposite, where maybe they're a little afraid of what they can do and they're not quite sure, so they're going to err on the side of caution, and finding those opportunities that you can get them to kind of surprise themselves. Like I remember working with the woman who is about to have her baby now and was on IVF and has had like a hell of a time of both trying and experiencing pregnancy. And I remember we did sled pushes across the turf, and she was like, like so excited that she just got to do something, and was like, I'm so surprised that I was able to do that and that I felt so good and so strong. So yeah, assessing and screening their mindset, so you know what kind of athlete they are, how they're going to approach this training cycle, where they might have like weaknesses and insecurities or fears, and how you can help aid in all of those things. So movement screening, breath screening, what strategies they have in place, if they breathe chest first or belly first, if they have that kind of connection that to their breath at all. Those three things are big screening tools. Yeah.
And does that, presumably that varies massively from person to person? Like you can get people on different ends of the spectrum completely.
Totally. And that's why it's a great place to start, because someone's training program will look totally different if you screen and they have a ton of flexibility issues, like they are not flexible at all, as compared to somebody who maybe has a ton of relaxin flowing through their body and they're super mobile and they're overly mobile, and they're going to need a completely different program. So just from a movement perspective, but then now from a breath perspective, let's say you're an athlete and you're constantly you might work with that person on deep bottom of the squats on relaxing their pelvic floor and getting them to experience that like empty feeling and not being continually contracted, So it's just like that's the fun part about it, is like you have three, if you're doing movement and mindset and breath, you kind of like any given day you can be like, what are we working on today? How's your mind? How's your breath? How's your movement?
And also like training age still is a huge factor in this kind of thing. And we always talk about training age at the gym. Like when someone comes into the gym when they first become a member, training age is like, okay, how long have you been training for in the past? Because obviously someone who's been training for 10 years and becomes a member is in a very different situation from someone who has never trained before and wants to become a member. And I would imagine with pregnancy is no different. So if they have a big training age, they're used to a big training volume, they're going to be able to do a lot more than someone who's like, maybe they are coming into the gym for the first time because they are pregnant, because they want to stay fit and healthy during pregnancy. Sure. So it's a completely different situation.
Yeah. And mentally, like you're working on the person who's maybe a little bit more fearful. They're just coming in, as opposed to the person who's been doing this 10 years and maybe thinks they know everything and maybe wants to try to push past some of those things. So yeah, it's a fun opportunity for the coach to kind of treat no two athletes the same, but especially in this, in this, but for the most part, I will say you can pretty much keep doing a lot of stuff, so long as you listen to your body and you're open to adjusting your strategy and like your mindset, and that you come up from a place of wanting to adapt as opposed to either maintain or challenge or pursue.
And don't be afraid to ask for help, right? Don't take that burden on all yourself. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Ask advice to people who've been through it before. Yeah. Because a lot of the problems that happen are reoccurring problems in different people. So it's like valuable to seek out knowledge from people who've had that experience in the past.
Absolutely. Especially since you learn that the more you know, the more you don't know. So like
Right.
when people are speaking in like absolutes, they probably don't know as much as the person who's like, well, I don't know, because it's so different for everyone. I've had
Right.
people across all the, it's like I'm much more interested in that experience because there's more of it. They have, they can speak to the if this, then that, as opposed to, well, if pregnant, then this,
So aside from obviously this podcast and the extreme knowledge that people will gain from it, what resources would you recommend to people looking for advice? Where can they go? Who can they reach out to?
So if you are pregnant, postpartum, if you're worried, experiencing any symptoms of just things you want to check in on, I always recommend going to your doctor and getting a referral for pelvic floor physical therapy. The tools and the knowledge that they have will far outbeat most other health practitioners, and especially fitness professionals. It's like, even though it's a muscle, it's like not a muscle. There ain't a whole section in NASM
Right.
built around pelvic floor,
Right.
So definitely seek that out. If you're a coach, don't wait to learn about pregnancy and postpartum until you have an athlete in your class or as your client. Seek it out, and like all knowledge, try to seek out the stuff that are the gray areas that are open for discussion, as opposed to the absolutes that are like, do this, not this kind of thing. And as always, I always recommend the pregnancy and postpartum athleticism course. It is welcome for both people just curious about their own bodies, as well as is suitable for a continuing education credit for fitness professionals. So Brianna Battles, she is the best of the best in that world, and has a ton of resources on her own. So I know she's built a huge digest of health professionals and different types of coaching and doctors and people who can help. So I definitely recommend looking into Brianna Battles, pregnancy, postpartum athleticism. If you're at Pharos and in Echo Park, come chat with me, come hang out with me. And I can help lead you in that right direction as well.
Or in Idlewild, you can come and see us at the
You
lodge
can
as
also
well.
come and see. Oh, wow. Yeah. We're in 2 places at once.
Also, there was another podcast with a former athlete who went through.
So Madeline Mosier, who
Great
is
podcast.
Such a great podcast. Yeah, she also is a pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coach. She's awesome. She's working out of San Antonio right now with her family. She just had her 3rd little babes, and another incredible resource. Her Instagram is actually one of my favorites. She breaks down a lot of like, if you're curious to go into more about the like breathing strategies and what that all kind of looks like, I definitely recommend her Instagram for that.
Amazing. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks, Emylee, for joining me.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you, Brandon, for coming up.
Always a pleasure.
We are, of course, open full schedule. We are increasing classes all the time at the Pharos Athletic Club, 1316 Glendale Blvd. The base gets bigger all the time. We're increasing our equipment all the time, so come
you
check
tell
us
them about the
out.
hip thrust machine?
The hip thrust machine from Atlantis is oof.
So good.
High demand for it.
You probably won't use it if you're pregnant, though.
But yeah, come see us when you can. Also, check out the website for jointhepack.fit/retreats for everything that's going on at Pharos Mountain Lodge. Come up and see us soon in Idlewild. And we look forward to seeing you in either spot shortly. But until next time, take care, guys, and see you soon. See ya. Bye.